Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Dieter Burrow. I live in Pensacola, Florida. I'm a licensed architect and I've been helping people in my community for the past 20 years. Living in Florida is no laughing matter. Hurricanes can destroy homes in a matter of hours. In today's episode, we'll be showing you how to build a hurricane-resistant home, especially if you're living on the beach. Stay tuned. Hey guys, just wanted to kind of touch real quick. We all know that hurricanes have a significant impact in the design of houses here in Florida. Not only in Florida, but throughout the whole coastal area. You know, you got Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina. Not as much up north, but you've also seen the impact of of hurricanes up in New York area. So flooding could be a significant impact. I'm showing you guys a quick little map of the United States and how some of the hurricanes can impact many areas throughout the coast. Now, we all know that there's a few things that we have to deal with, which are winds and storm surges. And I don't know if you guys understand how coastal design can impact the design of your home, but there are very important factors, especially if you're in a VE zone or an AE zone. So understanding how coastal storm surges can impact the design of your home is important. Knowing what significant impact can cause if your home is not anchored properly or the storm surge is higher than normal. You know, a lot of the times these storm surges can have structural devastating effects on your home, especially if you're on the coast. Not only that, but you're going to have to deal with wind forces that are higher than normal, especially if you're on the beach. Now, there are some things that we can do to prevent them, and this is kind of the topic we're going to be talking about in today's episode.
Powerful winds aren't the only deadly force during a hurricane. The greatest threat to life actually comes from the water in the form of storm surge. Storm surge is water from the ocean that is pushed toward the shore by the force of the winds swirling around the hurricane. This advancing surge combines with the normal tides and can increase the water level by 30 feet or more.
When looking at your property and where it's located on the coast or on the beach, you have to be aware of what zones have some additional criteria. In this slide that I'm showing you right now, you can see that in a V zone, you have what they called a freeboard. Freeboard is calculated based on how close you are to the body of water. So in some cases, we have to design houses with 3-foot freeboard, which tells us that the lowest structural member on your house needs to be above that 3-foot freeboard, which is the wave action that occurs when when the hurricane storm surge is creating the waves. So the further inland you are, the lower that surge occurs. And you can kind of see that if you're in a zone X, you don't have to worry about flooding. Now, in some cases, you do have to worry about it depending on where you're located and if you have a good drainage system. The other thing that we kind of look at, especially if we're doing anything, not only in the coast, but inland, we have to worry about water infiltration into the home. You know, if you have some designs where you have stem walls that allows water into the bottom of the house, you also need to design it so that it lets water out. So there are different things to look at when you are designing a house on the beach or close to the beach, know what your base flood elevation is and know what your freeboard requirement is. And you may think that the local jurisdiction may be too strict, but it is only basic requirements that they have. So you may want to lean on an architect to be able to help you, kind of guide you through that whole process and provide you with solutions that may be a little more robust than just your standard minimum. There's a few things here that we want to kind of understand. First of all, know where you're sitting, know where your building is, know your elevation, know if you're being impacted by storm surges or anything like that you may get flooded on. Building form, if you're going to be having buildings that are round shaped, square, cantilevered, tall, L shape, understanding and having a structural engineer involved as far as and also an architect that can help you with that is important. Make sure you always have lateral bracing in your foundation, especially if you have pile design homes. Understand what the impacts are. Understand your lowest floor elevation, and then understand your free of obstructions. Now understand that. Also need to understand what type of construction you're allowed to have within that zone where you're elevating. In other words, the bottom of the building, everything has to be designed to meet FEMA so that it can be washable or what they call it can be break apart, so that way it doesn't pull your building out from its foundation. So very important things to kind of consider. And here's a couple of the ones you can stop the slide and take a look at the video, and this would kind of help you, just give you some highlights on things to make sure. So benefits of exceeding the minimum requirements, and this is something that's really important for everybody to know, because you when you talk to a general contractor or a contractor in general, that a lot of times they'll give you cost saving solutions. There are some times that they're worth it, sometimes they're not, but don't do the bare bone minimum. Where I'm saying now is just don't do the bare bone. The minimum what the code requires. Try to do something a bit above what is required, and that's why you end up hiring structural engineers to kind of give you what they call the safety factors. So some engineers do safety factors of 4, some other ones do of 2, and some other ones do of 8. So there's, depending on the engineer you're talking to, know where you're located. Obviously, whether you're in an A zone or a V zone, and understand what the rules are as far as constructing and making sure that your building is designed to some criteria. Breakaway walls are important. I think I mentioned it before. Understanding that if you're within a certain area where you're having a lot of storm surge, you don't want these walls to stay in place to try to restrict it, and you end up having structural issues. These walls tend to break away, and you got to design them in that manner, and you got to be open to be able to design something that can get damaged, and especially if there's a storm surge. That's the nature of living on the beach. You're gonna have to deal with these kind of things, and know how the anchoring requirements. Know that we have to use corrosive resistant products. A lot of the times, people perform value engineering, try to remove stainless steel strapping, stainless steel fasteners, and that's a big no. You can kind of see throughout the coast where you can drive around in certain neighborhoods where everything is just rusting apart. Salt and steel don't mix. You try to design with products like aluminum, stainless steel, and even if it's 304 or even higher grade steel is even better. Again, it goes back to understanding how to protect your home and making sure that you're designing with products that are resistant to the corrosion. Not only with that, but the wind and everything else. Anchoring is vital to make sure that your structure is attached. When you have a chance, walk around your house and make sure none of your bolts are rusting. I've seen some of the integrity where you have bolts that you try to pull them apart and they just disintegrate when they're being pulled. So always make sure that you're performing some sort of visual inspection of what's there now. And if you have to replace some bolts, it may be a lot easier to hire somebody when they're capable of pulling them instead of dealing with the after effect of something falling apart.
When Hurricane Ian brought gusts over 150 miles an hour, much of the power grid in its path did not stand a chance.
Look at that.
And thanks to 2 feet of rain, even communities miles from the storm surge could not escape life-altering floods. But even as whitecaps ripped across the lake in Anthony Grande's backyard, he was chilled out in front of the TV.
Rescuers struggled to reach people stranded by the floodwaters that Ian left behind after raking the state overnight.
Are you guys okay?
By midday, more than 500 people had been rescued in hardest-hit Southwest Florida. The efforts are hampered by flooded roads and damaged bridges. This is what's left of the only connection between Sanibel and Captiva Islands and Florida's Gulf Coast.
When designing your house, whether it's a 2-story or 1-story, make sure that your system connects right through from top to bottom all the way to your roof. Anchoring your roof is very critical, especially here in Florida. So you make sure that you have tie downs. Now, there are newer methods that I've been seeing where they use what they call structural sheathing, that they fasten the wall plate and the top plates together by the use of plywood and denser fastening requirements, and then making sure that you have threaded rods every so often, especially in the corners around doors, windows, and then spaced every 4 foot, 6 foot, depending on who your engineer is and the location, especially the wind criteria requirements. Make sure you have threaded bolts that are long enough and thick enough that can withstand some of the pulling. Your issues when it comes to designing here in Florida is not the weight of your roof. It's what the wind does to your roof when it wants to try to pull it away from the foundation. So always make sure you're anchored to the foundation. Your roof is anchored. Your decking is anchored to your joist, roof joist. And I remember not only here but in South Florida, and South Florida is very predominant. You have a lot of masonry walls, but you still have wood framing on your roof, wood decking, wood joists. They're all the same. They need to be anchored properly, and if they're not anchored properly, you end up having catastrophic failure. Once wind comes in, water comes into your home, it's over. I mean, I went through Hurricane Andrew back in '93, and Homestead was devastated, and nobody knows if it was shabby construction or it was micro tornadoes. But always make sure that you have adequate strapping, making sure you're connecting to your foundation, whether it's an elevated building or it's a single story house. You're tying every possible point, from bottom to top. So that's the way we kind of want to design. Here's a good graphic of how kind of you even indirectly have to tie down to the pile through bolts, and then you have your rim joist anchoring up through from the floor beam all the way up from the floor framing all the way up to your wall. There's different methods, but and then of course depending on who your manufacturer is that provides the strapping, there could be a different grades of steel. So always check with your engineer to make sure that things are being done properly, and then have inspections performed by a third party if possible, and then always make sure that the contractor is responsive to the lack of or the necessity to anchor or provide more anchoring where needed, as shown as the engineer calls them out. So concrete is probably the preferred method of doing foundations in the coast because of the corrosive nature. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing heavy timber, but when you have a lot of water, I think timber tends to have issues where when it gets wet and dries, those are the weak locations when it comes to designing with timber. It's when it's on inside the ground and there's no oxygen, I think timber tends to do a lot better. But it's the areas that zone between the floor line and then the ground where it keeps getting wet and dries out. That's where you have heavy timber having issues. It's like, and also we end up also see issues with rebars when you don't have the proper chemicals added to your concrete mix to prevent rebar from having salts penetrate the concrete and then creating the rebar to rust, and then you end up having spalling. That I think that you guys have been seeing a lot of this occurring down the coast of Florida with condominiums and the collapse of one of the towers down there in Miami, I believe. So it's important to understand the material composition and then the impact of what the salts have on all these things. So there's a lot of design criteria where you end up having to talk to the engineer to make sure you have the lateral structural capability of a building, so that there's meat to your walls, so that there's that shear point or shear section where it keeps your building from getting racked because of the wind. There's only minimum requirements when it comes to storm surges. Again, you have that walls that can break away. We don't typically design so those walls don't break away, but we do design areas with diagonal bracing on the ground floor to keep the structure from kind of racking from the wind and the wave action. Here's a great graphic that shows you anchoring plates, connectors, and critical points where you're going to have your roof connected to your wall. And then, of course, we can go into protection of windows, doors, and which is critical, especially here in Florida. Make sure that you provide some sort of shutter or protection device. And here's just another graphic, kind of explaining to you the methods of anchoring the shutters to your wall. Well, thank you guys for stopping by, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. I may be able to do some more other videos and then show you guys some cool graphics, and stay tuned.